Hi guys, welcome to the improvement season. And we are well and truly into the thick of the improvement season now. It's definitely not Revive to Stage. Hopefully next time we will have like a segment of Revive to Stage when we know both of us are definitely taking the stage if we manage to align that. But yes, it is me, Steve Hall, as always. And on the other end, Pascal Steve, who has just cracked open a Monster.
As always.
Did I miss it?
I'm always drinking a Monster as of not recently, but the last times that we've done a recording, I always had one because I don't know why, but I'm always craving like a Monster whenever we chat.
Not
Is
a
there
super
some
Kong.
kind of correlation?
Did you hear what I said? A super Kong.
Oh, a Super Kong, yeah.
They're not bad, actually.
No, absolutely.
They're actually okay.
I mean, some of those cheaper ones, they taste very, very good. I mean, it is to be expected, right? I do remember when Red Bull was actually coming on the market. That was the only one that you could get your hands on. I was still young, though. I was still very young. And then there were these very cheap ones. And back then, you got very drunk with those as well, which is, in it for itself, if you think about it, a horrible combination of like energy with vodka or so. What it does to your heart, I mean, you're full on alcohol and you're just like drinking energy, not just like one can, but probably like half a liter or so, or even more. This is also half a liter, but you know what I mean? Like pure energy is crazy.
Yeah, what is it? You have like a suppressant with what's the opposite of suppress? Energy.
Enhancer, maybe.
Yeah, like they're opposite. Like one's trying to make you sleepy, the other one's kind of trying to make you energetic. And yeah, I've had some nights at uni where there's lots of vodka Red Bulls or what are they called? Monster bombs or something. I can't even remember. Jaeger bombs? Jaeger bombs. That's the one I
with
did. I like Jaeger bombs.
They were a thing back then. So I'm so out of touch with that. I have no idea what the youth is into nowadays. Are they still drinking? I have no idea. Is there something else?
Everyone's
they are probably demonstrating and getting angry with people on the internet due to everything and anything. Something like that, probably.
What was I going to say? There was, now we're doing, what's the alcoholic one that's like vodka and espresso? Vodka.
I have no idea, buddy. Too out of touch.
Completely forgotten it. Charlotte really likes it. And it's one I enjoy. It's like coffee and vodka. And it comes in like a nice glass. And they have normally some like coffee beans on top of it. Why have I forgotten what that's called? Vodka espresso? Something like that. Yeah, that's like the adult version, if you will.
So guys, welcome to the Improvement Season podcast.
When was the last time? Actually, no, I can remember the last time I had alcohol. Do you remember the last time you had alcohol?
No. I mean, we are not talking about like one sip of wine or so, right?
Well, then I can't remember me either.
Like proper drink, like maybe ordering something yourself or like, I don't know, like sitting down and having a couple of glasses. I can't recall. It's crazy because, I mean, this was a big part of my life for the vast majority of my earlier days, let's call it that. It's crazy.
I had a really bad relationship with alcohol at uni. It was very much like I drink to get smashed and then like I don't drink. So it's just literally like I try and get smashed as well on the, what's it called? Pre-drinks, because that's cheap. And then I try and avoid as many drinks as I could. But so often it would happen where I just like hit a wall when we go out because I'm just so past it.
I was the same. I don't know exactly why that was the case. Maybe you thought it was cool or so. Maybe something like that. Or I don't know. I really don't know. But I was the same. I was always like getting so hammered that I was just like lying in the corner. Sometimes even lying in my own vomit, I have to admit. And that's why I'm so concerned about my kids. And I hope that they don't become like me when it comes to these kind of things. I really hope that they are just like, I don't know, interested in, I don't know, maybe becoming nerds, just sitting at home and playing some video games. I'd rather have them being like this instead of like going out on the streets and just like lying in their own vomit and doing some very irresponsible and stupid shit and getting themselves into trouble. So.
What do you have a story of your worst drunk night? Or one bad one, because I don't know what my worst would be, but I can probably recall a bad one.
I mean, there have been quite some bad ones overall, but it is also a long time ago. So, and I haven't really thought about it or reflected upon that in a very, very long time. But also funny ones. So there was one story that I think told you guys about. One New Year's Eve where I was then kind of waking up on the side of my bed, and I was wondering, like, why am I sleeping on the floor on the side of my bed? And then it was New Year's Eve, right? Or next morning, and then I was waking up and I was completely drunk the night before. And I spare you the details as to how I got there. I drank a lot of alcohol, obviously, and then I was wanting to open up my window. Was walking around the bed and just looking down on my carpet, and the entire carpet was full of vomit. And then I found the keys to my apartment, and apparently I had a fight with the door because I needed to open up that door myself, and I nearly broke my keys. They were just like kind of turned in all different directions. It doesn't really sound like a bad thing. There have been much, much worse things that I honestly don't really want to share. Honestly not.
We're going to be complete honesty here, like raw.
yeah, but this is something that only my bandmates know about because they were with me. And this is something that even Katie, and I'm telling everything to Katie, share everything with her. This is one thing only that I have never told her even.
Secrets.
So,
oh dear.
Yeah, that is something that I'm not going to share here online.
Oh dear. Now people need to guess in the comments, what the fuck did Pascal do? That's so awful. He cannot tell us.
Yeah.
The worst for me from memory was my 18th. And I'm going to blame my friends here because they were just piling drinks on me. And I don't think I made it past like midnight. I think I got my sister picked me up and her boyfriend at the time, I think, who now is her husband, and I puked in the back seat. And
Lovely.
my dad disowned me. He was like, "You are not my son," blah, blah, blah. And I was just sitting in the corner, like limp. And I couldn't even hold a conversation.
I think it's just part of growing up, but I'm very, very, once again, I really hope that my kids don't really become like that or ever get that drunk, or I don't know. I just hope for the best, but I think that every parent is like that, and then they need to pick up their kid from somewhere at some point.
I think it was partly for me was I have an all or nothing mentality, and I'm maybe a bit of I'm definitely a shy person, and the alcohol kind of allowed me to just get past that. But I'd get to the point where to get past the shyness, I had to basically just forget the night, which was just pointless. And then other people, like a lot of the people I would like hang out with, they like would drink a lot, and then it would be encouraged. And yeah, I didn't hold strong enough to my own like beliefs, I guess, or values, or I didn't even have them really. And then, yeah, everything changed when I got hit by the van.
And now it kind of carries over into training and nutrition to some extent, which in it for itself, I think, when it comes to work, when it comes to those kind of things that take patience and time and commitment, actually are some good traits.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Like that kind of an all or nothing approach. Yeah. Of course, good in a relative sense. You can always, of course, bring up arguments or situations where it may not be the best, but in order to be quite successful in one endeavor, it kind of actually can be quite beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. How are things on your end, though? Because that was a completely random topic and introduction. But
yeah, that's true.
Interesting.
That's why I try to make the transition into then training and nutrition. No, things are going great. Once again, another week in the books in terms of recovery. I'm now 4 weeks into my recovery process, and I would be allowed now to take off that vest. But actually, I'm at a point now where it really doesn't bother me at all anymore. And I've read from several people, or in forums and all that kind of stuff, that many people were recommended to wear that for like up to 6 weeks. I was at the doctor's place and he said like there's no downside in wearing it for longer. So if it doesn't really bother you, yeah, continue wearing it. And that's why I'm continuing wearing it, because once again, it doesn't really bother me at that point right now. And that's why I keep it on for like up to 6 weeks, and then I really am getting rid of that. And other than that, I finally now moved back into starting to train my chest again. So today was the first session. It wasn't like a full-on dedicated chest session. It was more like, I think 3 days ago, I tried for the first time to sit in a chest press machine. The one that really is tailored for me, I think. That one is a good one from Matrix, the chest press machine that I have at my gym, but also perfectly suited for me. And I tested it out like 3 days ago, just very, very carefully, right? And very cautiously, and putting some load up there and really moving super slow on the eccentric and then also on the concentric, and also setting the pins so that I don't really get a full-on stretch on the pecs and especially on the scars here, because the scars are here and I don't really want to overly stretch them. And it felt all right. So I thought like, all right, for the next upper body session, I'm going ahead and giving it a try and incorporate like 4 sets. So 2 sets for the chest press and then 2 sets for fly movements, which I did as well. And also there being cautious and not putting too much of a stretch into my chest. And it was nice. It worked out well. And I think that I can slowly start to add more and more so. And I don't need to overdo it anyway, because the chest hasn't gotten any kind of attention for like 4 weeks, so I can start off very, very low. It's just about now finally providing a stimulus in order to stop the atrophy. Of course, it's probably not true atrophy, but of course to counteract the decay of your muscle mass in the chest. And that's the only thing that I'm concerned about with what I'm doing at the moment. And everything else actually improves as well. Once again, the only thing that I still can't do is everything that is kind of a stretch position over my head. So when it comes to lat pull downs, very complicated, especially like a pronated lat pull down is something that is a no-go as of yet. I can already incorporate something like a hammer grip lat pull down where it's closer to the body. And then when I get into the position, having slightly bent elbows already, so not a full-on stretch when I'm in that stretch position, and that already works. And yeah, I'm getting back. And that's great. And water retention is slowly fading away. Still some greenish colors here across the entire upper body. And it sometimes gets to me and gets to my head when I'm seeing myself. And all of a sudden, it was just like that. I look so much softer, but I also know that I didn't change anything significantly in terms of nutrition or so. And of course, that sometimes plays tricks on your mind, but I know that it's just, even if I gained like 1 to 2 kilograms, which I haven't stepped on the scale still, because it doesn't really make sense as long as I have like swelling in my chest area. And so to me, it is just false data that doesn't really tell me a lot. And I go more off by just like taking a look at my caloric intake, trying to keep constant with my energy expenditure in terms of like walking and all that kind of stuff, and controlling my body weight in that kind of sense. So that's kind of a wrap up for where I'm at the moment.
I guess with the chest training, you're leaving, I don't know if you even have a reps and reserve target in mind, or if you're just like feeling it to a point of like, that feels, if I go much more, it's a bit dodgy.
Yeah.
Or
so what I'm aiming for is, of course, a higher repetition range. So this time I was just moving very carefully, as I already said, and also I was just loading it much more lower than usual, where I then probably ended up at, so today I ended up at around 18 repetitions. Why I'm doing it like this is to somehow replicate the effects of something like blood flow restriction training. I think that, who was it again? Brett Contreras even said once, like, he's not the biggest fan of blood flow restriction training because you can accomplish the same results with just high repetition work as well. Similar results. And that is something that I found myself to be the case as well. And that's why I'm just aiming for higher repetitions. And yes, there is, of course, a little bit of an exhaustive sensation in the chest or in that muscle group. But being able to gauge whether it's a 4 aria, 3 aria, I wouldn't really be able to tell.
Yeah. Just kind of getting blood flow. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah, a little bit of a burn into the chest. And that's basically what I was aiming for.
You're not grinding reps to failure and
no, not yet. Not yet. Hopefully it will come soon.
For people maybe coming back from injury and stuff, like those high rep ranges, really controlled tempos, that's an excellent, like it can actually be a horrendously horrible way to train.
Yeah.
It's painful, especially when you start pushing it, but it's especially an effective and safe way.
Yeah, leg presses or hack squats or whatever, right? I mean, it's awful when you do it like this, but also very, very effective. And so I don't know if you are watching also Valentin Tambosi at times, right? Over on Instagram, and he has been experimenting with very high repetition work. So very, very high repetition work. I haven't really seen any kind of follow-up of any kind of conclusions that he was able to draw from it as of yet, because I think that he has done it for too short of a period of time to draw any kind of significant conclusions. But I think it's a very compelling idea to experiment with that, to see the results. Because if you don't really go there, you can just hypothesize what happens. And yes, we know in theory, like, okay, the slow twitch muscle fibers may be more so activated, etc., but still dealing with resistance training. And also, it's quite unclear when it comes to the scientific evidence what really happens when we are going through to true failure or so at very high repetitions in very much trained individuals. And something like that, I mean, if you give it a try, you will feel how freaking awful it is on something like leg presses and hack squats to go to those high repetition ranges and very close to failure.
I used to program now and then 20 plus, like a 20 to 30 repetition range. I started using that a little bit less just because practically it's not like the most, like, I think you can just say it, like going above 20 reps. It's not that it's not fun. It's just, it can be practically a little bit tougher to assess RER in that rep range as well, because you could just grind in those rep ranges a little bit more easily than others. And I just settled to using more up to 20 and not going much above that. And if I go above that, it's maybe like, I don't know, metabolite techniques and things like this, or at least loads that are equivalent to that rep range. But maybe I'll try incorporating them again at some point just to see.
So I think that we even did an episode around this like ages ago where we've talked about like the repetition ranges that we are using. This has been my answer back then, and it's still my belief up to this point that going above 20 repetitions is something that feels, at least for me, unproductive. That doesn't mean that it can't be productive. It may just be that the way I'm programming and I'm approaching some certain exercises are simply not tailored for that, then going above 20 repetitions. When it comes to something like leg press or hack squats, I could see that this is way more challenging going to over 20 repetitions than something like, I don't know, a tricep push down or so. Because I have the feeling that with those more isolationist kind of movements, when you really push it over 20 repetitions, that the first repetitions feel just like absolutely unproductive up to like a certain point then. You need to first overcome that threshold before it then feels really productive. Whereas I could already see that something with hack squats, leg press, just to continue taking them as an example, you're able to grind for a very long time and very, very, very hard as well. And I could see that these may be more challenging and may be more productive when you actually go there at times.
I could almost see the counterpoint as well, where because breathing is much more likely to be a limiting factor when you're going higher repetitions on those big compound lifts versus like an isolation lift, you can just lift throughout, you can just breathe throughout the lift. I could even see it the other way, where it's like your kind of cardiovascular system becomes a limiting factor before your before the muscle group. But I guess it just depends how you attack that lift. If you're just going continuous, like, I can't even imagine. I don't know. Maybe even after, especially talking to Brad, he kind of uses this metabolite phase where he uses like short rest periods, higher repetitions, lower loads. And it's kind of building fitness characteristics to allow you to have more, I guess, fitness capacity and buffering capacity when you go into the lower rep ranges. But again, the thought that came into mind, I didn't actually say this to Brad, was like, so you're building up this fitness capacity to buffer these metabolites and stuff, but aren't some of the isn't the theory that the metabolite buildup is what we're looking for? It's kind of like why maybe supplementing with beta-alanine is like contradicted. It's like it's helping you get more reps because it's buffering the thing you're trying to accumulate. So is it just making it harder? These are the things we just don't know the answer to. They're interesting to talk about, but ultimately no one has that answer.
No, absolutely. And that's also one of the reasons why my stance on increasing sets on a weekly basis or so has gotten way more conservative, even on a mesocycle to mesocycle basis, because your capacity of just doing more doesn't necessarily mean that you are actually building up so much more or providing so much more hypertrophic stimulus. And for the vast majority of people, it's simply not worth it to do more volume or more sets, even if it has a little bit more stimulus overall. The fatigue accumulation is also much higher, and the time that you're investing is much higher as well. And then you need to be more on it in terms of recovery and fatigue management as well. There's a higher chance of you getting injured, etc., etc. So there are so few benefits in actually aiming to do more overall, whereas the counter arguments for it, so the cons, are actually quite a lot. If you're just like ramping up the sets, that doesn't mean that there isn't a place for it also there, but it needs to have a very, very good justification and reasoning behind when you are making that decision.
Hi guys, Steve here. Just wanted to take a moment of your time to remind you of the Revive Stronger member site. Inside you'll find a thriving forum, a growing exercise library, presentations, research reviews, and courses. If you want to get involved, sign up via the description.
Yeah, the big thing that changed for me on that was it used to be a bit of a black and white. If I'm recovered, then I had sets.
Yeah.
But now it's like, if I'm recovered, but I'm getting good training stimulus in that, I feel like I've worked that muscle group pretty damn well in that session. I've got some pump, I've got a disruption. I know it's fatigued. Do I really need to add? If it's less than last week, maybe. But in reality, you're not adapting at that speed, more than likely. Some circumstances it might be there, and maybe some freaks out there.
Exactly. And this is also a question that has been brought up by one of my athletes this week in the check-in. And I actually, because he was asking, like, why aren't we adding some sets here week to week or even mesocycle to mesocycle? And I said, like, okay, I'm looking for certain criteria to be met. And then I counted them up, and I've myself realized of how many criteria need to be in place first for me personally before making the decision of actually increasing sets. And one of the key things is basically the counter arguments to yours of like, if you are overly recovered and you don't really feel that it has done anything for you in terms of then the productivity. Right, so leaving the workout and feeling like, okay, I did something here for the muscle group, and you're not making any kind of progress, and you can say with 100% certainty that your execution and the quality of the movement is perfect and very much on point, right? So you can really rule out everything else. First, then I would say like, okay, then try adding a set, but then on the other hand, you can always make the argument of like, okay, why aren't you trying a different exercise than first? maybe there is one that is much, much better suited for you, that requires you to do maybe even just the same amount of volume, but gives you so much more in return. Isn't that even a beneficial thing? Very, very likely, right? And also, it brings then also up the theory that I had in terms of building your, how should I put it? Because I haven't, for lack of better words, it's basically your neurological efficiency when it comes to recruiting your motor units and muscle fibers. And it's like I said already in the past, that I do believe when you begin to work out, you have a certain amount of capacity, so you can't really intentionally contract it or control it, but the body is allowing you a certain amount of motor units and by that muscle fibers to be engaged in a specific skill or movement. And with time and with adaptations, the body is getting better and better and allowing more motor units and more muscle fibers to be fired with a specific movement. Some people, when they start, they have already a kind of a certain amount of motor units that they are able to recruit. And those are probably the ones, when the amount is pretty high, who will be growing very, very fast because a lot of muscle fibers are being recruited from the get-go. Some people, it may not be the case. It's kind of a neurological sensation or a neurological thing that takes time then to recruit more and more motor units and muscle fibers over time, in order then to grow and to stimulate the muscle groups, right? So that means, with our example, if then with training age, we're expecting that our neurological adaptations are getting better and better, we should be able to not need to add sets over time, because we're getting more and more out of each and every single repetition, because the body is recruiting more motor units, more muscle fibers on a per rep basis. And especially when we're then adding some load and mechanical tension overload happens, or progressive tension overload happens over time, we are progressing as well. And we are causing more and more stimulus to the, or more and more tension to the muscle groups as well. So is there ever really a need to increase sets? Not necessary. I think that if you're working in a specific range, you hardly ever need to go outside of that range or increase it to an infinite amount or so. I hope that you were able to follow me with all of the things that I said.
Yeah, I guess it comes back to the argument that some people would have of like, and it's the unknown territory that you get into at that point where people argue, yeah, you're just getting better at recovering from sets, or if you are recovering from sets is more like, because people will still say, like, do as much volume as you can that you can recover from. And I understand that that's actually maybe a useful proxy to work towards, because it's like an end point, and the literature does support seemingly that more volume, if you can recover from it, you grow better. But it's like you said, if you're progressing, it's hard to argue against the requirement, at least the requirement for needing more to necessarily keep growing. It's whether or not you gain more by doing a bit more. And that's the argument and the answer we don't necessarily have one to.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I was just checking my Instagram, and every time I post up now the new leg press that I'm on, and I'm coming down and people see my pelvis move, their minds are just like, is that okay? Like, what's going on? Like, and all this. And actually, I asked you, and I don't think you replied to me, but I think maybe it's because you agreed with me. I'm not sure. But my thought behind it is, if my pelvis can move, so long as my lower back is secure. If I'm feeling like my lower back is coming off and rounding with my pelvis, that's where I shouldn't go down that deep. I don't know if you have a different opinion, though.
No, but I exactly know what you mean. But for me, it's the same. The pelvis is moving. Right, but I have no feeling or sensation that my lower back is under pressure also. I think this is one of those things where people are just having maybe a misconception of what's acceptable and what isn't. It's the same when it comes to, like, for years there was this idea that the lower back is not allowed to move at all in a deadlift or so. And then Stuart McGill, who is probably the biggest expert around back health when it comes to those things, has just shown that even if your spine from the outside seems to be neutral, it is going into a flex position inside the body, right? So there is a level of flexion that is still absolutely acceptable. And if you really think about it, if the body was that fragile, I mean, other things would break much, much earlier already. It's the same with momentum. And you've brought it up in some of the latest episodes with Charlie, for example, and also with Menno, that there seems to be the idea that you are never allowed to use momentum on certain lifts. But I'm using momentum as well. It's just a fine line between using momentum and having no control over the range of motion, and using momentum and still having control. And that is something that is, of course, very hard to depict from the outside and to very much tell the difference from an outside perspective. You have to feel it then, right? And there are certain movements that are just like more so, I think, prone to be used with momentum, and others aren't. And for me personally, it's the same when it comes to lat pull downs, for example. I'm using a little bit momentum. Same goes for the bicep curls, for example. You're using a little bit of momentum as well, at least the straight-handed cable curls, for example. Or something like dumbbell lateral raises. Has always been something that I was doing because it felt more right to me overall. I can't really put it differently.
Yeah, I think it's one other example with the pelvis movement is similar to me like a butt wink. People are like, oh, you can't have butt wink. It's like, well, if you're moving from an arched spine to like what visually looks like a neutral spine and you're not getting like chronic pain or discomfort, it's just moving. Yeah, sure, maybe it's you don't want it, but it's fine if that's occurring a little bit, and maybe it'll dissipate as you get better flexibility. But on your point with momentum, it's even more clear to me when I've been using some of this Strive and Prime kit, and basically on there you can choose where on the lift is hardest or easiest. And so basically I select it to be mostly hardest where I'm strongest. So on like the back machine I've been using, it's hardest at the stretch position, and then it gets easier in the shortened position, like the load is just less. And that's the same with like if you're using momentum on a lat pull down, it's easiest stretched out and then it's harder as you get closer to you. So if you use momentum, you're basically equalizing that a little bit, which essentially is like trying to match your, I guess it's the resistance profile to the strength profile or the strength curve. I don't know the exact terms, but it just feels better. And like I said I did a post on it. I was like, probably a lot of people do this, especially advanced people. They do this without realizing because it just is better, more stimulating. Yeah. It's like upright rows, like they're one. If I just do it with no momentum, I'm like, it just feels terrible. Whereas I like to get it so I can get this into this position. Otherwise I'm just leaving it.
I think though it's very hard then once again for the people from the outside to tell how it's done. It's the same when it comes to mind-muscle connection. How are you teaching mind-muscle connection? It's very, very tough, right? Even explaining it to someone else. Maybe it's the same as the thing with seeing colors. How can I know that red is the same for you as I perceive red? Because it's just a spectrum, right? And there it may be the same, that the sensation that I have for mind-muscle connection or just like feeling it in the musculature may be completely different to what you perceive, but we are speaking about the same thing. And there it is as well. I think that's why if I teach someone like proper form, I most of the time teach them to have like very, very strict technique, because then you are building a good foundation and you can still then deviate from that when you have the experience and when you have built that solid foundation. But starting with using a lot of momentum and then justifying that, I don't know, a Charlie is doing that as well because you've seen it over on Instagram. It's just, I don't think, a valid point for yourself or a valid justification in order to do that. Right? It just doesn't really make sense. You're just justifying maybe bad behavior in order to rationalize it for yourself. that what it is that you are doing is not wrong, but has a reason for it. But in reality, there is no proper reason for it. You're just like butchering the technique.
I don't know if I used this analogy in one of the podcasts, but I've got it here and I might repeat it. But to me, it's like learning how to drive a car with an instructor, and like everything has to be perfect and blah, 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 blah. And you get the basics down. And that's the best way to learn, is do things completely right. But then you get into the roads for yourself, and that's when you really learn. And it's kind of like, for us, we have to teach someone without momentum and stuff. And then once they've got that down, it's like, try just like being a bit more explosive or purposeful in this portion of the lift. It might feel a bit better. And then like, oh, and you can see it almost when you watch them. You're like, yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Not this swinging around garbage where you just get to use more load.
I think, and I've been falling victim of that myself in the past, to overthink certain things. And I'm not speaking about the overthinking that many people are accusing us of, or other people in our industry, but I'm also speaking about the overthinking in terms of like the execution. Should I have like a wide stance on the squats or a narrow stance, or should I have my feet turned outwards? How am I initiating the lift properly? Is it like with bringing my hips backwards, or pushing my knees out, whatever, right? Something like that. I did a lot in the past, which then acted like a barrier whenever I approached a set. And sometimes it's just about switching off, trying to make it feel in the muscle that you want to hit, and just go through the range of motion, all right? Sometimes you don't have to overthink things. Just like try your very best to move in a manner that feels good and strong and controlled for you.
This is something that is common between, especially us two, probably the other coaches at Revive Stronger. When we're looking at form videos, it's a case of like, and I think you're the same, where you look for general principles to be achieved. If they're being achieved, it could look a variety of different ways. And I just leave it with, because mine might look different to theirs, but I'll be like, how does it feel? Like that's kind of what you're getting to, is like, if it feels good, it feels proper, you're abiding by the principles of like good technique, have at it. Because you might do it slightly differently to one person to another person, but that's good because you're different. And that's where that little bit of difference comes in.
No, absolutely. I have nothing more to add. Well, things on your end, by the way, Steve.
Good. So I think last time we checked in, I said I felt like I was like through that recovery period for sure. I don't know if I mentioned that I increased my calories. So people like to hear the number, but sometimes I like keeping it away, because I think people get like, I don't know, do they get like FOMO because I get to eat so much food? But the good news is my appetite is aligned with it. So I'm happy to eat more. I could comfortably eat at maintenance. And this is something, actually, I guess this is a good point. And actually this is great because I did a post of like my side chest, and the difference between my 2014 side chest to 2017 earlier in my training career was less difference between my 2017 to 2021. And people would be like, oh, that doesn't make sense. You're more advanced. You shouldn't have seen as big improvements. And you said, repeat what you did between 2017 and 2021. I'll tell you what I don't want to repeat that I did do in 2014 to 2017, and why I didn't grow as much. It's because I got comfortable. And what I mean by that is I still trained really hard. I still enjoyed my training and did all that good stuff. I took care of various things. But with nutrition, I'm one of those individuals who can maintain a lot of calories. My appetite is good and I enjoy that. And I look decently lean at like a lowish body fat. I got comfortable and I didn't push body weight up. I was just like, I need to be in a small like really, really small surplus. And if I didn't gain weight over like, I don't know, a month, it was like, oh yeah, okay, it's all right. Maybe I'll bump it up by like 50 calories or something. And I just got complacent. And I don't want that to happen this time around. So it's like, part of me is like, do I really want to increase my calories by another 100? Like I'm on a good amount already. But I'm like, no, I want to make sure that I make the most out of my time, especially, I don't know, not that I'm getting old, but I'm like, if I want to step on stage in 2023, what's going to make sure that I look different if I maintain my weight like if I got complacent for a few weeks and just maintained weight, or the fact that I was like on top of that. And so that's something I'm making sure to stay on top of, is despite feeling good, training's going well, I want to make sure I'm in a surplus, just to make sure I'm making the most out of every bit of time that I've got here.
Yeah.
So that's really the only thing that's changed.
So in terms of my comment, it was more so referring actually to self-improvement, or just improving overall. In repeating, of course, I'm never a fan of the saying of like, if it isn't broke, then don't fix it. I really think it's a lazy, to me, unintellectual statement. Right? Because that indicates, things are all right, but that doesn't mean that things are great. It could be the worst thing of them all. It just wouldn't suck, right? And there may be the opportunity for huge improvements and a lot of things that you still can progress on. And for me, it was more so referring to like there has been a huge learning curve, and you always then actively and deliberately try to get better over that time frame. And I think that especially from 2017 to the last season, there has been nearly a better improvement than from 2014 to 2017. Not just nearly, there was a significant improvement. And I think that this is more so due to you putting the work and effort and actively trying to get better, and not just like taking it for granted, just continuing doing the same thing and maybe having more of a linear approach. No, you had more of an exponential increase in terms of your progress because you were analytical about things, also unemotional about it as well, quite objective. You analyzed the situation and always try to respond in a better manner moving forward.
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
Yeah, I like what you said there. I think actually then the goal is not to repeat the improvement that I made that time. It's to improve on that improvement, you know? That's the goal, is to be even more kind of on it and give my body what it needs. And that's what you kind of, as you get deeper into this game, you get better and better at doing that, you hope, if you pay attention to everything. Yeah. So that's something I'm definitely trying to do. One thing I am realizing, maybe I don't know if that's the same all the time, but this week, let me give an example. So on Monday Tuesday I train legs. I just trained them today. Again, I'm training 3 times per week, and my Tuesday leg session for quads, this is quite like lower repetition range, hack squats, and what else do I do? Leg press. And the pump and disruption I got today beat the Tuesday session. And that again was just leg extensions and then leg press and less volume, but higher repetitions, which I don't know if this is always the case for me, but it is making me think that maybe I want to prioritize a bit more higher repetition work. And this is where if I just followed blankly, like, oh no, like the low rep range is the most hypertrophic or something, like someone might argue there's more mechanical tension, what have you. But I want to listen to my body a little bit more and just make sure I'm kind of giving it what it needs in those sort of scenarios. So those are the sort of things that are, I'd say, more advanced kind of, not concepts, but like to listen to your body to that degree and to really feel out what that means in terms of pump and disruption. Like walking up, like it was just clear, like walking upstairs was a little bit more difficult. I had more vascularity and my quads were fuller after the fewer amount of sets of what would be, quote, maybe easier work, higher repetition work. So it's stuff like that I'm excited to kind of discover and move forward with.
And that takes time, but also it takes awareness as well. You need to sit down and think about it, of what it is that you did and felt, especially, and maybe even note it down, because otherwise it's so easy to forget about it. If you don't take notes, if you don't have a logbook, for example, and that's always like when athletes aren't tracking things meticulously in their spreadsheet, that may seem fine. And I think that some coaches are fine with that, especially like someone like Cliff. I know he doesn't really use a lot of spreadsheets, but he's also more so coming from the realms of like nutrition, right? And then guiding people through something. Whereas when it comes to certain other things, I think that when people aren't making use of that and have to reflect back on the last week of what went well, they easily forget about things that may have gone well or things that may have gone very, very worse or bad as well over the entire week. Then they just give you a general idea of what has happened. And I think it's crucial to really analyze the things that particularly went well and the things that didn't. Everything that is in the middle, I think, is totally acceptable and doesn't really need to be addressed too much, but especially those outer ends of the spectrum, right? If you take care of those, then you can actually push the needle to one direction or the other. And for me personally, it was the same when it comes to back movements. Over the past years, I've realized that lower repetition ranges for back movements, they simply don't work for me. But also on the lat pull downs, when I'm doing something like a pronated lat pull down or so, everything beyond 15 repetitions doesn't really work either for me. So on the lat pull downs, what I've realized for myself, everything in the rep range from 8 to 15 works freaking well. And for even something like bent over rows, I still need to be in the repetition range of like 8 to 12. And 8 is very much kind of the last set of then the entire working sets and stuff. Everything below that goes kind of down the drain when it comes to the mind-muscle connection and where I feel it. I can't even tell you where I'm then feeling it, to be honest.
Yeah, that's why I like the combination of pump and disruption, because inevitably you're always going to get a better pump when you're in higher reps. Generally, like it's just you get more opportunity to accumulate metabolites and blood flow and everything else. But the disruption is often a bit less because you get more like tension and breakdown through the heavier loading. So it's why it's useful to have both, because then wherever it's like the two are the greatest, that's probably your sweet spot for rep range. It might change over time. And that's why it's useful to kind of keep a gauge on it and keep an eye on it. And it's cool to hear about, your back and what feels good. It's interesting. Like I definitely have that for some muscle groups. My chest is one of those muscle groups where you could almost take my chest through any rep range and it just blows up. And you'd think I'd have a massive chest, but there's definitely an area like I need to improve. And actually, I guess this might be an interesting thing for people to hear about. I don't know if you get this, Pascal, but I've been working through a shoulder injury and it's very kind of weird. It's like clearly it's not right, and it just kind of gets inflamed. But it's so weird. As I was going through my last mesocycle, I might have brought it up previous podcast, going through my overreaching week, it was getting a bit upset. And I thought it would dissipate during the deload. It didn't. And actually I could sit here and it would feel like uncomfortable as if, and I could like poke it in a certain area and like, oof, like that's sore. And as I've been going through this mesocycle and being careful not to make it worse through training, like it's just got better and better. So like you ever have those injuries where you're like, I could stop, but I think this is one of those injuries where it's like if I navigate this right, I don't need to, and it will kind of work itself out. Do you have those?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is that many see something on Instagram, or they are looking at their, idols, or the people, that they are following over on Instagram, whoever it is. And often those people don't really talk about those small nigging aches and pains. But I can tell you and assure you that many people deal with things nearly on a continuous basis. When I have a mesocycle where I didn't have anything at all, I'm actually quite surprised, where it's not even just, so for me personally, there's always like that one single spot on the back, for example. My left knee is always kind of acting up and with certain movements. I think that it's correlated with my hip, for example. So there's always something. But I don't really talk about it because it doesn't really keep me away from doing the things that I'm supposed to be doing. And I can always work around it. And what I found with those kind of things, right, it's often kind of an overused thing with a movement pattern that wasn't really the best for you or it was just too much of a workload in a short period of time. And modifying things or being even more controlled is very often the solution. And a very common thing, just as an example to it, is knees. You can't imagine, well, probably you've had it as well with a lot of athletes who have been experiencing knee issues. And one of the things that nearly fixes it all the time is to, first and foremost, take a look at their knee flexion movements, such as squats or leg press. And whenever they are reporting some knee issues, like 9 out of 10 times, it's because they are using too much momentum going into the bottom of the lift and then bouncing out of it. Nearly all the time. Right? And then when it comes to shoulder things, nearly the same thing as well. When it then comes to pressing movements, that they are shrugging their shoulders up or so, something like that, and they are just using too much momentum, right? That they reverse immediately out of the bottom of the lift, which then, of course, puts a lot of pressure on the joints and the tendons and ligaments. But yeah, in short, yes, I do experience things like these quite commonly, but it's always something that I can work around. It's just a matter of like being creative in that situation.
I love that you introduced the idea. Pausing is my go-to. So
yeah,
because in my prep, I was suffering a bit of a knee issue, and I was hack squatting twice a week, and I moved one of them to being paused, and that alleviated it. And it's the same with all my pressing now. I'm pausing at the bottom before going. And I found the exercise that was irritating the most, and I removed that exercise. So that was dumbbell pressing. For whatever reason, I don't know if the stability or something, it was just every time I dumbbell pressed, and I don't know why, I just really wanted to dumbbell press. I've not been able to dumbbell press consistently for a long time for some reason, but it just niggled it every time. I was like, it's just not worth it. I've got like some decent machines here. Let me just get in those and use them instead.
And sometimes it's the solution is just to take a step away from it for a shorter amount of, or even longer amount of time. And sometimes it is also due to a combination of things that you're doing, such as, I don't know, dumbbell pressing with a certain kind of fly variation in the same session that then always caused it to be agitated. What I found with my left knee, for example, was the combination of being on my treadmill too often, and then a lot of knee flexion coming or knee extension coming from knee extension movements. So like leg extensions on the leg extension machine. That was a combination that really, really irritated my left knee. And it was mostly then happening in a time right before the surgery, for example, where the weather was shitty or was on my treadmill a lot of times. And they're just like these things you just have to monitor and play kind of like as if you have an allergic reaction to food and you don't know what food it is. And instead of you're not able to test it, you just like have to then rule certain things out and then see whether you still get an allergic reaction to certain foods and then try to avoid it afterwards.
Talking of foods, this is random, but because now I have a Lidl nearby, we talked about the Super Kong, which has been decent. But does your Lidls in Germany have these protein puddings?
Yes.
Did you see me post those?
Yes.
Have you tried them?
I wanted to actually comment on it because they've been introduced here in Germany in several supermarkets, like I think end of last year. I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, lots of protein products were swept onto the market, which I was a big fan of. And now there is kind of like grease pudding and rice and exactly. And so many products with protein that actually taste very good. And that protein pudding tastes very, very good. Very good. For the amount of macros, it's kind of like a proper pudding. And I even give it to, and now people would say like, how can you do this? But it's just a protein feeding, right? Even our kids have that. And to be honest, I would have, every single time that I'm giving it to the kids, I tell Katie, like, how how I would have loved to have these kind of products back when I was young, because I was such a fat kid back then and I was only eating junk food. Just imagine if I would have saved like nearly half of the amount of calories per serving, and the vast majority of calories also then coming from protein. I just have to assume that it's much more beneficial. There was even that, I can't really recall his name. There's a YouTube channel who then also analyzed the situation with Shelby Starnes at some point. Okay. Can't really recall the name of that channel. One of my athletes sent me a video of him where he then talked. No, it wasn't Derek. But Derek was on that podcast at some point as well. Okay. But he then analyzed the demographic growth, so not growth demographically speaking, but the height of people demographically speaking over then the centuries. And he came to the conclusion that protein was a huge driver of people height in society over then the decades. Because back then there was a time where then there was a lot of agriculture, and because of that, many people had like wheat products, which was primarily then carbohydrates only. And there was a time of stagnation when it comes to the height of people. But first then with industrialization and people having more and more access to then more protein products, people started to grow into height again. And I'm just thinking like, hey, if that's really true, right? And first and foremost, I can save some calories for the kids. They still have something sweet, because I don't want them to just restrict themselves from stuff like that, because other kids still get candy and stuff, right? But having and building some awareness while having some beneficial aspects to it, that's great, right? And by the way, on that note, before I give it over to you, Nutella, right? So, You know, it's also called Nutella, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
It is amazing, but it's also 600 calories.
Yes, ridiculously dense.
For 100 grams, right? And as a kid, and this is being sold as a breakfast product. If you think about it, that's just absolutely crazy, because it's kind of as if you're eating a Snickers bar.
The spread, right?
Yeah, exactly. As if you're then putting a Snickers bar on your bread in the morning. Yeah. And that's ridiculous, but it's just all about marketing and how they sold it. Yeah, some nuts and some milk, right? But it's 600 calories. We have like a product at home that is kind of a replacement, where it's like only 180 kcals per 100 grams, and it really tastes nearly exactly the same. It doesn't really come super close to Nutella, because you simply can't, right, due to some certain ingredients.
Fats, isn't it?
But I mean, it's only 1/3 of the amount of calories, and you still get the same. And the kids don't really care; they can't really tell that much of a difference. And I had lots of Nutella when I was young, and if I could have saved like 2/3 of the calories coming from Nutella, and then also things such as the pudding and stuff like that, I mean, I could have. And this is just, of course, in theory, I could have ended up not being obese, not running risk in becoming a diabetic, with maybe products like this. So I find it very, very cool to see something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, people need to get down to Lidl and buy all the protein pudding. It's like I have one, it's like I'm buying that, so I have one every evening because it's perfect, like feeding before bed.
Totally.
Basically all protein, and the texture's great. Like it's like you said, actually like pudding. It's not like a yogurt. They're yogurt ones. The other protein ones, they're like milk product or whatever it is. They're not as good. They're like yogurt. But the pudding ones, they're great. And like I think I know the spread. Like it's like I don't know what the brand is. We have like Choc Shop, but they do like a spread product as well. And yeah, when you're a child, like you don't know the difference really. And as an adult and a parent, you can control that variable. Oh. So they think they're getting like Nutella basically, but they get something a little bit better.
And to be honest, you can of course be the parent of being like, no candy in our household. But does that really help? I don't think so, because when they are growing older, they have never really learned in portioning it or dealing with it in a responsible manner. And then it could end up actually just much, much worse later down the line. You want to build confidence. You want to actually make them being responsible for their actions and being able to control certain decisions as well. And also then for clients, for example, slowly, when you're living in Western society, which most of our athletes do, there is barely any kind of excuse to be made anymore not to hit your protein targets for the day.
Yeah, big time.
It isn't expensive anymore. No. It isn't super inconvenient. It doesn't really taste awful. So, yeah, there's no real excuse anymore.
That reminds me of on the high street here, like I went for like food out, and quite often me and Charlotte, because she's vegan, obviously, I want to be vegan with her and have a vegan meal. Quite often it lacks protein, but on the high street, there's like a Boots, there's a Sainsbury's, there's a Tesco, and all of those have like a protein, like ready-made protein shake. Yeah. So I just buy that and drink that before or after. It's like, it's not that hard to kind of keep it like we're so like lucky and privileged now with protein. It's crazy, which is great.
That's exactly it. I mean, you should look at it from this perspective of how easy it actually is, because it was much, much worse not that long time ago.
Yeah.
And also, this is not a lot of effort and work and time commitment if you really think about it. Like, if you're short on time and you can't really buy protein stuff on a daily basis, then you're going to the next little and you just buy in bulk, like lots of quark, skyr, pudding, take some, maybe, I don't know, even at Lidl, there are amazing, no, it's Aldi. Okay, Aldi, but Lidl, I think, has it now as well, like a very good vegan protein sources as well.
They sell frozen soy meat.
Yeah, something like that. So there are lots of options available, and there is actually no good reason not to hit the protein targets any longer. It was much, much harder back in the days, and even then, bodybuilders were capable of doing so. And that was during a time where protein bars tasted like, I don't know, a brick wall, and also whey shakes were just like, couldn't even dissolve in water.
I remember that used to be something you'd review a shake on, like, how does it mix? It's like, what? It should mix.
Absolutely.
Have we spoken? Oh, wait, no, we've probably hit an hour now, haven't we?
Yeah, and I need to actually then pick up Hugo and bring him to his friend.
Okay. Yeah. Well, guys, thank you for listening to us and our rambles. Hope there was something useful to take away from that. As ever, please do comment. Like I said, comment what you think Pascal's embarrassing moment was, or if you've got an embarrassing drunken moment.
You will never. So if anyone even gets close to it, I will send over a hint that you are close to it. But
a year of free coaching.
Yeah, something like that. Because I'm quite confident that no one will be able to guess what actually happened. So you can try, but I can tell you it's over the edge. So if you're making any kind of suggestions, or if you have any kind of ideas and you write it down, feel free to go a little bit beyond what you think might have happened. And then you may get close to it.
Flew to Thailand, had a night with a Thai boy. So guys, give us a share, give us a thumbs up. Remember, Spotify, you can rate us. We appreciate you, and we'll catch you soon. Take care.
Cheers.
So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Steve. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people. But each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't
that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge, and I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.